Svala Hekla, 29 measured water. The way some people measure silence by where it breaks. She arrived in Siglufjordur with a roll of maps, a steel thermos, and a contract that said she would help route a geothermal pipeline that might keep the town's winter from chewing through everyone's savings. At the kickoff meeting, the project director Erikur traced a straight line on the projector with the edge of his hand. The main pipe would cut through the Skjaldbride ravine skirt, an old mud field, and slip past a low ridge the locals called the Whale's Back. Fast, cheap, efficient. He spoke like a man reciting a prayer that had already saved his life. Svala took the packet and said nothing. Lines that tidy made the back of her neck prickle. Real ground resists rulers. Water resists them twice. She spent the night in a steel sight container with a buzzing heater and wind ticking the walls like a patient fingernail. She unrolled a paper map, laid her palm on the contour lines, and remembered her grandmother telling her about a warm river that came only in fog, thin as a vein, older than any name, the kind that ran through stone and through days people thought they had already used up. At first light, she shouldered a small pack and walked toward the ravine. Sometimes a good engineer should look with eyes instead of instruments. The dirt track narrowed until it was a careful thought. Moss breathed under her boots. Black lava showed old ribs. Fog hung at chest height and tasted faintly of minerals and something like boiled apples. Then she heard water, not the cold chatter of a glacial stream, but the quiet simmer of a kettle left too long on low. The fog pulled apart. A ribbon of amber water slid through the rocks, steam lifting like soft thread. The surface did not reflect the sky. It reflected something deeper, as if looking into a well where memory floated instead of leaves. Svala knelt and touched it. Warm. Not hot, not scalding human warm like a hand after work. "Do not drink," a man said behind her. She turned. He was 30 or so in a thick knitted sweater, a leather satchel slung across his shoulder. Ash-colored hair, sea-blue eyes that had watched seasons and kept most opinions to themselves. "Why not?" she asked. "The elders say it carries memory," he said. "If you drink, you remember what you hid from yourself. Remembering can be a colder thing than snow." He smiled small and lopsided. "But you are an engineer. You will have another word for it." In the water's moving amber, she thought she saw her grandmother's hand, laying a warm cloth on her forehead, one winter when fever bent the house. Her grandmother had been gone for years. Svala blinked. The image dissolved into steam. The radio on her belt crackled. Survey crew. Timetables. She stood, thanked the stranger. He said his name was Brynjar Shepherd, sometimes poet. When she looked back a breath later, the fog had taken him like a polite secret. That afternoon she reported the warm flow and suggested a revised survey. Erikur frowned. "If it is not on the paperwork, it is not on the ground," he said. "Bring proof." She handed over a hand sketch with notes on estimated temperature and flow based on steam and sound. The geologist shrugged. "Not enough to reroute a 1,000,000 chronoline." "We continue as planned," Erikur said. "Stake, drill, deliver. Weather favors us." That night Svala drew anyway. She bent the line around the ravine around the place where her palm had learned the water's warmth. She was still sketching when someone knocked on the container door. A thin woman stood there in a worn coat, hair the color of winter grass, eyes like low cloud. "Ragna," she said, "I used to catch babies. I hear you found a warm flow." From her coat pocket she pulled a small, flat stone, smooth as a forehead. Fine whorls had been rubbed into it by years of thumb and thought. "Place it by the water," she said. "You will hear better. Not everything old is true." Enough of it is what keeps us from being rude to the world. Morning broke, and the big drill coughed itself to sleep 20 centimeters into good sense. Diagnostics showed nothing. Restart. Heat spiked in the bit, but rock refused to consider fracture. A pickup loaded with braces slid sideways on what should have been frozen ground. The mud wore a grin no one had painted. Tomas, a quiet crewman with hands like split beech, frowned down at the tire marks. "Not usual," he said to the air. Eirikur's voice sharpened. "More gravel, more men, less folklore." Svala set Ragna's stone near the warm flow. Steam touched it, and the faint whirls deepened like a watermark revealed. She pressed her ear near the edge. Beneath the regular talk of water, she heard something like a prayer spoken by someone who had lost their book, but remembered the rhythm. In that murmur, she felt the shape of a night from her childhood, the stove lit high, her grandmother burning the last of the good wood, so the room would pretend noon. She stood palms damp. The water invited, but not to be used, to be listened to. Brynjar returned with the unceremoniousness of a shadow. "Did you drink?" he asked. "No." "Good," he said. "Answers that fit in the fist have a steep price." They walked the flow's edge, touching moss and dwarf birch. "People here call it the warm," he said. "It arrives with fog when someone is leaving or coming back. It knows the houses with small lamps no one else can see. Ragna hears it better than anyone, but she is getting old." "Put it on the map," Svala said. "Protect it." "Maps are a kind of promise," he said. "We break too many already, especially the ones without signatures." Svala stopped. She knew why straight lines tired her. Years back she had signed a contract that took her out of Akureyri too soon, away from a love she did not know how to keep, and a grief she did not know how to carry her mother's death on a slick curve no one had banked properly. On day 3, Svala placed a new plan in front of Eirikur. Bypass the ravine, bend along the whale's back, split the main into 2 slower branches. She spoke in numbers: grade, subgrade, sheer strength, ice risk. She did not say warm river. She said local thermal anomaly and unstable substrate. Eirikur scanned the cost column. His face did math on his conscience. "You want to turn a project into a poem," he said. "I want to keep the valley from becoming a wound," she said. The meeting dragged. A few on the crew admitted to the odd malfunctions. A few rolled eyes. In the end, Eirikur said, "One more day on the original route. If it keeps fighting us, I will consider the detour." His tone sounded like a door held open with a brick. Wind pivoted after dark. Fog came like a blanket shaken once. Svala's phone buzzed. "Ragna." "I need you," she said. "A girl is laboring early at the top of the slope. The ambulance is stuck at the ice bend." Svala took the pickup. Brynjar appeared as he did, as if he lived in weather instead of a house. They drove through a short blade of headlight. The hill before the girl's home was a sheet of integrity testing the world. Ragna pointed down valley. The fog was lit from within by a thin amber lane. The warm. "If we walk the ground beside it," Ragna said, "the warmth holds the crust. But slow, and do not step in." Svala eased the truck onto the moss at the very edge where frost loosened. The tires held. They inched. Brynjar spoke improvised lines like stakes hammered into the dark: one step, another, breathe now. They reached the house. The girl's face was white as the wall behind her. On the way down, Svala counted breath instead of distance. At the clinic, the child cried a sound that cut the night and stitched it back. Ragna put a hand on Svala's shoulder. "The warm comes for the living too," she said. "Do not lock it under a pipe. Word of the night traveled the way fire does when someone leaves the shed door open. At the morning meeting, several voices softened. Eiríkur's did not. Health emergencies are health problems, not pipeline problems. Do not pour feeling into engineering. If we build by story, we will never build at all. Svala did not hate him. She saw in him a fatigue that comes when an old idea has worked too many times and turned itself into a door that closes on other people. Engineering is for people, she said. Not the other way around. He drummed his pen. I fly to Reykjavik tonight. I will not sign a budget blowout. Do as you like while I am gone. The door clicked shut behind him. The room cooled. Tomas looked at Svala like a man who fears another man's courage will cost him his job. Outside, Brynjar watched the ridge and said nothing at all. Svala did not wait for a stamp. She took the crew to the whale's back. Temporary stakes, shallow cores, 3 deep tests on the firmest benches. The paper map flapped on the hood. She spoke technical, but something thin and tensile dragged through her voice, belief pulled thread fine so the wind could pass without tearing it. The work went oddly well. The lava here layered like old books, each page strong enough to carry the next. No hot mud, no temperamental bit. Someone played folk music from a phone. The notes clicked like spoon on a clay bowl. That evening, Svala walked to the ravine. The warm slid on uninterested in human schedules. She set Ragna's stone by the flow. In its whisper, she heard the new baby's laugh and old footsteps shrinking as they wove into the present. We are trying, she said to the air. The air did what air does. It held the words and let them thin. Just before dawn, a message from Eiríkur lit her screen. Reykjavik refuses the detour. Return to original route. Otherwise, I shut this down. Svala stepped into the half-blue morning. Numbers marched through her head. If the project died, families would keep feeding cheap coal to iron stoves. Kids would cough. If she kept the straight line, the worm would wear iron and learn the language of valves. She imagined it knocking its head on the underside of rock, trying to find its own voice. Brynjar came and sat on a low boulder without words. They listened to a wind that had not yet decided whether to be gentle or just. There is a way, Svala said. She would recost the detour as a phased build split into smaller packages and stack a ledger of indirect savings, fewer ice crashes, lower emergency costs, emission reductions from stable ground, preservation of intangible heritage valued through municipal risk frameworks. She would send it to the council and to a small energy journal. The sound of the plan in her mouth was the sound of a drum anyone might hear if hit hard enough. Brynjar nodded. Some rivers only run when someone walks beside them, he said. Ragna brought brown bread to the town hall and told the mayor Sigurdur that bread rises better when wind comes down the slope a slightly different way. The room laughed. Then she added, and because a baby lived last night by something you cannot print in a contract. The baby's mother arrived with a bundle of blankets. An old man said he had once been saved by a warm patch nobody else felt. One story does not fill a spreadsheet. 10 make a quiet wall. Svala's technical note reached a local editor who wrote an article in the driest possible language, adaptive routing with microscale data integration. No mention of the worm, just a door left ajar in a professional tone. By late afternoon, a late storm slid across the fjord. School let out early. The town bus began the climb. At the ravine bend, the bus lost its argument with ice. It spun once-kissed rock with the rear and sat there trembling. The driver called. The wind ate most of what he said. Ragna called Svala. The worm is bright, she said. If we shadow it, we can walk the children out. Svala and Brynjar took ropes, headlamps, blankets. Snow stung like dry sand, which is a trick some snows know. They reached the bus. Faces small and pale looked out, as if the glass were another kind of winter. Down in the fog, a thin orange lane pulsed. "We go in a line," Svala said. "Hands on the rope, feet on the edge where the ground is warm. No one steps in the water. That means do not hurry." They went, slowly. The warm traveled with them, not guiding like a hand, but like a look. When wind shoved, Svala thought of her mother and the unbanked curve and the stone she had carried for years in the pocket she kept forgetting to empty. They reached the houses. Soup, blankets. The driver sat and tried to say thank you and had to settle for breathing instead. Erikur returned at sunrise. He stood on the whale's back and squinted at the first neat line of detour stakes. The storm had written faint veins into the ground. He listened to the night's story in 3 versions. He did not answer at once. He looked at the map again, as if an annotation had appeared in the margin. "I will sign," he said at last, "on one condition. Overages come partly from the emergency fund and partly from cultural funds. I will eat the loss against my bonus. Do not make me regret it." His voice was dry as a twig. Someone poured warm water on it anyway. Svala nodded. She did not feel triumph, only a stone set back where it belonged in a wall. The pipeline curved around the whale's back like a steel serpent that had learned manners. After each section was set, the crew paused for a minute that no one admitted was a kind of listening. Jokes were made. Then quiet came because the ground did indeed have a pulse not of machines, not of men, but of the space where the two learn each other. On Weld Day, the fog was thin, and the sun walked past for 10 minutes like a busy neighbor. Ragna brought bread and a thermos. Brynjar read a new poem. It was not better than the last one, just truer. Thomas laid his hand on the pipe and said, "It no longer looks at me like a stranger." In the ravine, the warm moved on. Nobody waved. Everyone felt they had just passed a threshold with no visible door. The official plan updated crisp, dark blue ink for the new route. In her notebook, Svala kept another map not for any office. She marked places where she had seen people lay a hand on someone's back. The clinic porch, where the early baby cried. The cafe where an old man coaxed a tape player to sing. The dirt lane where an exhausted father paused and then kept walking. She called it the map of warmth. She and Brynjar walked the shore when the northern sky forgot how to sleep. He told her about ewes who found a path that never iced even when the air pretended salt. She told him about groundwater graphs that rose to the surface on the very weeks people thought all water had fallen asleep. Sometimes they said nothing for long stretches. The silence felt like a good line break doing work no adjective could. One morning a call sent Svala driving south without stopping. Her grandmother had died. The funeral was small. Rain stippled the stone and failed to make it fully wet. At the grave, she felt in her palm a pebble she had been holding for years. She set it down. Into her came the smell of soup on a dark afternoon, and a voice telling her not to miss meals or herself. Back in Siglufjordur, she went straight to the ravine. The warm slid by. She set her hand near it, not in it. "I am still here," she said. A small laugh moved the fog the way a scarf moves the air. Brynjar arrived later and did not ask. When they stood to go, Svala was lighter, not emptier, just carrying the weight correctly. Erikur asked for a transfer. He left Svala a short note. "I learned slowly. You learned faster. Congratulations." A young manager from Reykjavik arrived. Tinna's eyes were bright in the way of people who would actually listen. "Would you take technical lead for the North?" she asked. "More pay, less time. You can stay based here." Svala looked out at the fjord where silver lay on the water like someone had sifted old flour over a table. "Yes," she said, with a clause. "Future projects must include an assessment of intangible cultural impact. Not a line for form. A frame we use." "Write it," Tinna said. Winter edged in slowly, as if it had finally learned the town's name. The line hummed a low, patient note. Houses breathed evenly. Children slept harder. On the whale's back, snow landed on the pipe and melted in thin, finger-shaped marks, as if someone had laid a palm there and lifted it. In the ravine, the warm did what it had always done. Nobody took pictures. A few people came home with a smell in their coat that reminded them of bread. Svala walked the edge sometimes. She never stepped in. She did not need to drink to remember. Remembering enough was its own kind of heat. A visiting research team asked how she had integrated culture into engineering. She laughed. "I did not integrate it. I made space for it to stand." They laughed and clicked record. Also, she said, there are sounds in water you cannot hear if you only bring machines. They left. Svala wrote a line in her notebook. "It is not that the pipe learned to bow. We learned to bow while laying the pipe. We learned to set down our own noise so another sound could travel with us. Thin lines strong enough to tie a pocket of warmth to a cold day." That night, wind swung northwest and fog thickened like a thought that refused to be brief. On the slope, Svala found Ragna sitting with a small wooden cup in her lap. "A cup is never empty if you hold it still," Ragna said. They sat listening to the warm sing a song without a singer. "A keeper is not the one with keys," Ragna said softly. "It is the one who knows when to step aside. Do not turn what you cannot see into a table of contents. Let it be a shadow traveling with you, like a hand on your back when the stair is dark." When Svala walked down, snow began. The flakes touched her hair and melted immediately, like questions that had finally found their answers and did not need to be written. Spring undid its buttons. On the city map, the new pipe looked like handwriting, an easy letter practiced many times until it carried someone's name correctly. Svala stood above the ravine and set Ragna's stone at the edge. The surface felt cool and smooth. She heard nothing special, only a plain quiet. Maybe that was the reward, a small interval of peace after a season of wind. Brynjar arrived with a thin notebook. He had written a bad poem that could not help being written. They read it and laughed the way people laugh over soup that is slightly too salty and exactly what they needed. If you asked Svala what she was proud of later, she would not say the title or the schedule beat by 12 days. She would say a choice to go around in order to arrive close, to accept a longer curve to save one less cry, to keep a warm flow that did not need a name. If you asked whether the warm was real, she would shrug like a woman who knows some questions should be asked by placing a hand on the ground. She would say that a bus came down one storm night, that a baby cried, that people standing near each other are warmer than alone, that maps you do not draw still guide you. And if you asked the price, she would smile. "The price is a curve," she would say, "a curve that bows, and teaches us to bow back."